In Spider-Man: Homecoming, we learn that you don't need an awesome superpowered supersuit in order to be a hero. Of course, it does help to have some superpowers, and if you don't have any, well, maybe a supersuit isn't such a bad idea. Of course, we all know Marvel movies are fictional, but is it possible to build a set of Iron Man armor in real life? Well, it turns out that it's surprisingly doable if you have the budget for it. Time travel may not be feasible, at least not yet, but if you've got the cash, then you're that much closer to being an actual superhero. How many of us grew up wishing that we would wake up one morning with incredible new powers that would allow us to emulate our future heroes? Okay, and how many of us still wish we would wake up as superheroes even though we can barely wake up without our knees cracking? The fact of the matter is that we all like to think we are just a few special tricks away from being the kind of hero we see in comic books and in movies. That's why Marvel movies resonate with so many people of various ages and backgrounds. Their characters are so vivid, flawed, and realistic that we can relate to them in many ways. Hey, if Iron Man likes shawarma and we like shawarma, then we're halfway to being a hero. Or at least that's what we tell ourselves. And then there's a reason why Iron Man specifically captures so many people's imaginations. Because under the suit, he's just a regular human. He's not an advanced alien race. He isn't a mutant, and not just because they couldn't use the M word in the MCU until recently. He's a normal, squishy, mortal human who was able to essentially build himself a set of superpowers, and that's something most of us envy. But of course, there's one big difference between Tony Stark and the average comic book fan. He's a billionaire. And to be honest, becoming a billionaire is almost as impossible as developing superpowers. But who among us doesn't daydream about winning the lottery or inheriting a fortune from a long-lost relative? Well, if that happens, you might be that much closer to making your own super suit that even Iron Man would approve of. And while all of that seems pretty impossible, we have some good news. In the comic books, Tony Stark once claimed his bleeding edge armor cost $7 billion to create. Where are we even supposed to get a single billion? We can't all be self-made billionaires. But in reality, you might be able to cobble together something similar for just a few tens of millions of dollars. Hey, we said it was good news, not great news. Now, we could wax philosophical about why we all want to become heroes all day, but that's not getting us any closer to stopping crimes or flying around in a super suit. Let's get down to nuts and bolts, and we mean that literally. Let's take a closer look at the technology Tony Stark uses in his Iron Man suits and what real-world tech we have that at least comes close. Of course, one of the primary components of any iteration of armor is the helmet. It protects your fragile human skull while being pummeled into the ground, so it's pretty important. But we all know Tony's helmet does a lot more than just keep his big giant billionaire brain safe. He's able to control the entire suit using voice-activated controls integrated into the helmet. These kind of controls are still being tested, but they're a fair comparison to Tony's tech. After all, when you're a fighter pilot, a split-second delay can be the difference between a successful mission or, quite literally, crashing and burning. This F-35 Gen 3 helmet-mounted display system is designed to provide a pilot with massive quantities of essential information regarding their plane, flight path, and tactics that could come in handy. And the real challenge is making all of that info immediately accessible and having the whole thing be intuitive to use. It allows pilots to pull off the kind of targeting and tactical maneuvers we're used to seeing in the MCU. And all of that is in addition to more standard tech like night vision and advanced binocular vision. When these helmets were first proposed, the companies behind them estimated a development budget of $54.1 million. And yes, that's just for the helmet-mounted display and not the fighter jet. They're sold separately. Then we have the rest of Tony's fancy wearable computers, which interestingly enough are some of the cheapest components. Researchers have been working on wearable computers for quite some time, and a safe estimate for one would be around $20,000. Okay, maybe we should have said that it's relatively cheap. And speaking of tech that protects all of our squishy bits, let's talk about the exoskeleton to Tony's suit. Even if his fancy programs are disabled, the bare bones of the suit are incredibly impressive. What makes Tony's suit so amazing is that it greatly enhances his physical strength and maintains his maneuverability. Seeing knights wearing tons of heavy armor may make them look safe, but just imagine how difficult it must be to actually move around in one of those things. There's a surprising amount of real-world applications for such an exoskeleton, which means, of course, that it's something people are working on. And then there's soldiers who could benefit from using these when they have to travel long distances carrying tons of heavy gear. So it's probably not surprising that various companies have been working on these kinds of exoskeletons for years now. Just take a look at the Raytheon XOS exoskeleton, which allows users to lift up to 200 pounds like it's no big deal. It might not be quite Iron Man level, but at $10 million to develop, it's still a bargain all things considered, especially when you consider the cost of making a portable nuclear power source. If you have a giant, awesome super suit, you're going to need a way to power it. Otherwise, it's just a very expensive paperweight. Tony uses his arc reactor, but a more realistic version would be the multi-mission radioisotope thermoelectric generator, or the MMRTG. It's way bigger than Tony's arc reactor, containing 10 pounds of plutonium dioxide. But in the real world, NASA was able to use it to power the Martian rover Curiosity. And if you're curious, to know how much the MMRTG costs, the answer is about $36 million. We all love the idea of having a jetpack, even though we know we would probably immediately crash and end up in a fiery explosion. This is another piece of tech people have been trying to create for years with varying degrees of success. But Eve Rossi actually managed to use a jetpack to fly over the English Channel, which makes him practically a superhero as far as we're concerned. A strap-on jetpack will set you back another $400,000, but you'll have to modify it to fit inside the boots of the suit. So far, that brings us to just over $100.5 million, but we're going to need a few more accessories to really get our hypothetical machine right. Let's add some flair to the boring old super advanced exoskeleton by throwing in some back and shoulder mounted ailerons for $2 million. This will allow us to attach one anti-personnel gun to each shoulder at a cost of $500,000 for both weapons. Then there are the $2 million wrist-mounted anti-tank missile launchers and the 2 thigh-mounted deployment systems for $1 million. And just to make getting around a little bit easier, there are 2 hand-mounted stabilization and maneuvering jets. $2 million seems like a lot, but not toppling over midair is pretty priceless. Nobody wants an awkward and embarrassing superhero moment. That brings us to a little over $108 million. But even if you have all that money, do you have the technical know-how to put it all together? Or is that $108 million just going to get you a big pile of tech you can't use? Or more accurately, a very valuable and dangerous pile of tech you can't use? What if there was some way for you to buy a pre-built Iron Man suit instead of spending millions optimizing your own? And what if we told you it's a downright bargain compared to this do-it-yourself version? Okay, so maybe you can't actually wear this totally over-the-top version of the Mark 43 armor, but just use your imagination. The toy company, the Toys Asia, really took the idea of action figures to the next level by creating this suit based on Avengers: Age of Ultron. And yes, it's life-sized. It has 567 individual parts, which are controlled by 40 different motors. So having a little bit of tech knowledge would definitely be helpful in case something breaks. We don't even want to know how much return shipping would be on this bad boy. This life-size toy Mark 43 armor will set you back $365,000. That's a lot of money for a super suit that you can't wear, but it's also undeniably awesome. Richard Browning once served with the Royal Marines and worked as an oil trader before quitting his job to work on making a super suit. Not that we advocate this particular career path or anything, but he did make a pretty awesome flight suit. No, it isn't filled with all the hard-hitting weaponry that Tony Stark has at his disposal because, well, do we really have to explain why that would be a terrible idea? Instead, Browning focused on a suit that provides a smooth ride through the air and allows a form of maneuverability that most jetpacks just don't. At max speed, this suit can go up to 32 miles per hour and fly up to 12,000 feet. If you want your own, you can expect to pay $450,000 for the privilege. But of course, there are some downsides besides the price tag. The fuel pack limits your flight time dramatically, giving you about 3 to 4 minutes of flying. But Browning hopes to address this problem in the future by improving fuel efficiency. Right now, he says it's just for fun, but that in the future, the suit might have serious search and rescue applications. So what we're hearing is that Richard Browning is the new Iron Man. Well, at least for 3 to 4 minutes at a time. At its maximum flight time, that's only $112,500 per minute. Sure, it might not be the safest or smartest thing to spend your money on, but where would we be if Tony Stark had that kind of attitude? Then again, he also created Ultron, so maybe we should take that with a grain of salt. At least that's something we can afford. Even though the $450,000 Iron Man suit lacks all of the bells and whistles, it seems like the most fun and cost-effective way to play superhero. What do you think about the feasibility of a real-life Iron Man suit? Do you think it's something that could or should exist at some point? Let us know what you think in the comments section, and then click subscribe for more videos from CBR. See you next time.